evening, everybody. David Paul here in the KHOU 11 Weather Center. We're going to talk about Hurricane Delta. This hurricane has gone to Cat 4 today, winds up to 145 miles an hour. It's in the Caribbean. It's moving toward Cancun tonight, then into the Gulf tomorrow, and then it's on a track that takes it uncomfortably close to Houston, Galveston. Right now, the Louisiana coast is the most likely place for landfall, but we're going to go over this storm, and it's one we need to watch carefully just in case that track shifts just a little bit. Would change the impacts here dramatically. As it stands right now, these are the impacts that we are forecasting for Houston, Galveston. When would we feel impacts? Wednesday night into Thursday and Friday. What would they be? On the coast, a gusty northeast breeze. We'll have a gusty northeast breeze inland as well, but only 10 to 15, maybe 20 miles an hour. Nothing we couldn't handle. It would be much like Laura was. If you remember that hurricane that hit Lake Charles, we had very light winds here with that, with no power outages. Galveston would see at least minor coastal flooding, and rip currents would be dangerous for swimming and boating, and a lot of wave action on the coast. So you'd want to stay away from the water. Highway 87 and the low spots could have some high water spots at times of high tide. That is based on the forecast as it stands right now. It could still change a little bit. It's interesting today. This is the forecast track of NOAA's high altitude recon aircraft for hurricane hunting. They've been at high altitude and they've been zigzagging across the Gulf of Mexico out here today and then surrounding the storm itself, not flying into the center. Now, why are they doing that? Why would they fly out here where there's no storm? Well, they're sampling the atmosphere, and the data that they get, humidity, pressure, temperature, dew point, they send it back to NOAA. They put it in our hurricane computer models, all that good, new, fresh data in the atmosphere out ahead of the storm. And that helps the computers get a grip on how this atmosphere will impact the potential track. So it's going to help us make a better forecast track and forecast intensity for this hurricane in the coming hours and days. That data that they've ingested, and that's what the plane is right now. They're heading back. That data will be ingested into the overnight runs tonight, and so tomorrow morning and tomorrow noon, that data will help us get a better forecast. Here's Delta. It's a small hurricane. In fact, it's something that we in the weather office call a tiny cane or a pinpoint cane. That's because the center of the storm right here is only 3 to 5 miles wide. That is tiny. It is so small that an eye, a visible eye, has not opened up on infrared enhanced satellite. With a Cat 4, winds 145, I would expect to see a nicely formed eye, but you don't see one here. That is because of the unusual smallness of the center of this storm. However, we do expect that eventually an eye is going to open up as it goes through an eye wall replacement cycle. Here's Cancun, here's Cozumel. This is going to take a direct path right toward Cancun and Cozumel tonight into the wee hours of Wednesday morning. That's when it is expected to make landfall. And perhaps the winds near that tiny center as high as 155 miles an hour. The smaller the structure of that center, the more intense the winds can become, but it's also a fragile structure. And as that tiny, tight, powerful wind field interacts with the landmass of the northeast tip of the Yucatan, it is going to be disrupted. I don't think it's going to get pulled apart, but it is going to be disrupted. It'll weaken it down to Cat 3. It will also spread the wind field out. So it will become a larger hurricane, a larger wind field. And it may strengthen back to Cat 4 here in the open Gulf of Mexico Thursday into early Friday morning before weakening to Cat 3 again, and then it makes landfall. At the moment, most likely along the central Louisiana coast as a major Cat 3 hurricane, but instead of having a very tiny little wind field like Laura did, this one at this point may have a very broad wind field, and that will have implication as to the impacts we see along Louisiana and the Texas coast. Let's take a look at that wind field. Here's where we stand right now. Very tiny little center of the storm. Watch how this interacts with the Yucatan, and as it goes into the Gulf of Mexico after interacting with the Yucatan, did you see that? Look at how it spreads out. So now we have a much larger wind field. That is classic hurricane hitting a landmass and the wind field opens up. So now we've got a very broad wind field going into Wednesday. And then as that approaches the Louisiana coast, gets closer going into Friday morning, look at how wide this wind field is. It's huge. So we will see an east and northeast breeze across Houston, Galveston. But remember, at the moment, that track's going to keep us on the weak side of that storm. So as long as it holds a forecast track into the central Louisiana coast, We stay on the dry side. We get a breeze. We might see a few little rain bands come in here, but we don't get a whole lot of activity except, of course, the wave action on the immediate coastline. What concerns me most about this forecast is what this would do to New Orleans, Lake Pontchartrain, and the low-lying areas of the southeast Louisiana coast. They would be on the dirty side, the strong side of a powerful Cat 3 hurricane. And this is a similar track as Katrina took. It also would be of similar strength, maybe a little bit stronger than Katrina. And that concerns me because it was the wind action and the way it sloshed the water back and forth in Lake Pontchartrain that eventually sloshed too much water and force against the levees, and they broke, and it caused all the flooding in New Orleans. So this may end up being a very intense test of the repair, rehab, and strengthening that they've done over the past several years to the levee system in New Orleans and around Lake Pontchartrain. And so we'll be watching for that very, very carefully. But this forecast would be a great outcome for Houston, Galveston. We would just have a light northeast breeze and we really would be fine. This is a more specific wind forecast based on the forecast as it stands right now. This is Thursday on the coast, 25-mile-an-hour winds out of the northeast, 10 to 15 inland. That's fine. Going into Friday, we would have winds maybe sustained in the 30s on the Galveston coast. 15 to 20 mile an hour winds a little bit further inland, nothing we couldn't handle. Maybe we get a few scattered rain bands with that, but that would be Laura-like, which really did very little here in Houston and southeast Texas. We dodged a bullet with Laura. We might dodge this one as well. As far as tomorrow, our beautiful weather continues here. Quite often have gorgeous weather while a storm is brewing in the Gulf because we get a north wind and it stays dry. We'll warm to 89 tomorrow afternoon, a beautiful day. Here's the extended. So for the moment, Thursday, Friday, those are the days we would feel the impacts most likely. I've put in a 20 and 30% chance for a scattered shower. We might see a rain band come in. Northeast wind at 13, northeast wind at 18, gusts to 25 or so, especially closer you get to the coast and east, Liberty County, Chambers County, but nothing we couldn't handle. However, if that forecast track were to shift closer to us, very quickly we would see our impacts intensify. And these forecast changes do quite often happen, especially 4 days out. So I would urge you to please watch the weather with us once in the morning, once in the evening, at least once a day, so that no one gets caught off guard in case this thing decides to come closer to us and impact our lives a little bit more than we want it to. So the next forecast update from the Hurricane Center, an updated forecast cone, will come at 10 o'clock tonight. We'll have the update on KHOU 11 News at 10. I think it will be most interesting to see the computer model runs and the forecast updates from the Hurricane Center going into Wednesday, after it's passed over the Yucatan and after we've ingested all that new data that I showed you from those high altitude flights. I think on Wednesday afternoon and evening we will really be able to sharpen the pencil on a more certain forecast track. In the meantime, we will see you at 10 o'clock for the latest update and an updated track and computer models on the TV side at 10. We'll see you then.